Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional league, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. First and foremost, guys, I want to say that I hope you're doing well. I hope you guys are healthy. I hope your family members are healthy. I hope you're staying safe, and I really, really hope you guys are staying home and practicing social distancing when you have to go outside. You know, that seems like more than anything, the most important thing right now is just being responsible and making sure, you know, we take care of the welfare of not only ourselves and our families, but of other families as well. With that, though, guys, I'm your host, Marcus Vargas, and today we're going to do something a little bit different, something I haven't done before, I haven't done here before, and that's going to be a fantasy football mock draft. So yeah, I want to take you guys through a little mock draft. I drafted up and see what you guys think. Of course, everyone's mock draft is different, right? So of course, you know, when you see mock drafts or when you hear these, you have to take them with a grain of salt. You know, this is not a rundown of what exactly is going to happen in your draft or what I think, you know, exactly should happen to be perfectly, you know, everyone to have a perfect team. This is a mock draft that I believe, you know, is sort of realistic and what I could see happening in many, many mock drafts. So with that, I do want to say, you know, this is a 10-team mock draft. It's based off of a PPR system, and, you know, there's no crazy scoring, no bonuses or anything like that. It's just, you know, 4 points for a touchdown pass, 6 points for touchdown reception or a touchdown run, and, yeah, everything, all the standard scoring. So with that, let's get right into it, guys. So with the first pick, the first overall pick in this fantasy football mock draft, I have the first team selecting Christian McCaffrey of the Carolina Panthers. Why? Well, guys, you know, of course, you take it with a grain. You take the previous year stats with a grain of salt, right? Because, you know, it's very, very hard to repeat monster seasons. But Christian McCaffrey scored 471.2 fantasy points last season. That puts him second all-time behind LaDainian Tomlinson in 2006. So he literally had a historical season last year. And, of course, you know, while it's hard to predict, you know, whether he's going to repeat or regress, you know, it's more likely that he's going to regress, and it's hard to expect another 470-point season. So while I know he's going to regress, I still think he's going to be the centerpiece of the Panthers team. I mean, like I said before, it felt like with the signing of Teddy Bridgewater, they're focusing on just drafting Christian McCaffrey. Centering the team around Christian McCaffrey, running that offense through him, and I think he's going to get an absolute ton of touches, and he's going to run this team. So round one, pick one. You should be going for Christian McCaffrey. Now, round one, pick two, Saquon Barkley. Now, you know, his points per game last year weren't that stellar. He averaged around 19 points per game last year, which is still pretty good. It's just not, you know, when you see the elite running backs, you know, 20 points per game, or you see elite wide receivers getting 20 points per game, you know, you look at that and you're like, well, but, you know, we have to remember, Barkley was out a couple games because he had an ankle injury, and it just sort of felt like that was nagging for the entire season. So when he actually did come back, it still affected his play. You know, if we look at the end of that season, though, he was averaging a ton of fantasy points, and, you know, during the fantasy postseason, he was averaging 27.9 points. So Saquon Barkley is an elite running back. He's an elite fantasy football running back. And, if it wasn't for the Carolina Panthers ditching Cam Newton and signing Teddy Bridgewater, who is a massive game manager, I would have Saquon Barkley at number 1 here. I have a great feeling about him next year. I have a great feeling, he's driven a bounce back from, what we consider a down year because of his injury. And I think he's going to be an absolute monster in fantasy football. Now, with pick number 3, I have Ezekiel Elliott of the Dallas Cowboys going. Now, of course, the Cowboys haven't yet reached a total deal with Dak Prescott, but I feel at this point in time, this is Ezekiel Elliott's team. Now, I know last season it was more about Dak Prescott and throwing the ball around, but something just doesn't feel right to me. It feels like if they truly believe that the Dak Prescott would have received his extension already, he's played well enough to receive the extension that, is the market value. Unfortunately, he hasn't received that, and I feel like even though Ezekiel Elliott had a career low in his fantasy points per game last season, it was 19.5. So that's pretty insane. Also, guys, Zeke still became the first player in NFL history to average 19-plus fantasy points per game in each of his first 4 seasons. So that's reliability. That's consistency, guys. And, consistency is absolutely huge in fantasy football. If you aren't that consistent, then you're a bad pick from year to year. So you got to rely on this consistency, and that's why I have him so high. Even though he might not be scoring a huge ton of points every game, or he averages only 19.5 per game, if he can do that for you every single game and not have any horrible down weeks, guys, that's big as well. You have to remember that. It's sort of intangible. Now, for my next pick, round 1, pick number 4 for team number 4, I have Dalvin Cook. Why? He was an absolute beast last year, and he finally had his breakout season. And he was second in fantasy points per game as a running back, only behind Christian McCaffrey, of course. The only concern with Dalvin Cook would be his injury issues. It seems that every season he has had an injury issue or missed a game or two. I know he missed most of his rookie campaign with an injury, and that is the only issue I have here. But I still have him very high because his fantasy potential is through the roof, and he's just a monster. Yeah, it's as simple as that. So round 1, pick number 4, I have Dalvin Cook. And pick number 5, our first receiver goes off the board. He should be the first receiver off the board in many, many drafts. Michael Thomas, New Orleans Saints. Why? Well, Michael Thomas is coming off one of the best fantasy football seasons for a wide receiver ever. He finished 9th all-time in fantasy points at the position, and he broke the record, guys, for catches in a single season. So with 149 catches, that's 149 points just off of his catches, guys. He's pretty insane, and he's going to be the first receiver off the board. I'm pretty sure off the top of my head, he led, he had 90 plus more points than the next receiver on the fantasy football ranking. So Michael Thomas for sure should be a first round pick, top 10 pick, top 5 pick, in my opinion. Now, for pick number 6, this might be a surprise for some people. I have Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints. Now, I don't have him here based on his last year's performance. I have him here because I feel that he's going to have a bounce back season, and he has a ton of pass catching potential. Now, one of the reasons he didn't have as great of a season last year, guys, is he really didn't get that many touchdowns. He only had 6. However, towards the end of the year, his last 6 games, he scored 4 of those touchdowns. He scored 4 touchdowns in the last 2 games. So, he still has that sort of high-octane explosiveness, and, he's a young, talented guy, so it's really hard to pass on him. And, guys, I think he's going to get a ton of receptions, which is absolutely amazing for PPR. Now, guys, my number 7 pick, and I'll do this one right before we go into break. I think it could be a controversial one, but I like it here. Austin Eckler of the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, guys, don't get me wrong. I know, we have a small sample size for Austin Eckler. However, I don't know if you know these numbers, guys. In Austin Eckler's first 4 games without Melvin Gordon, he averaged 25-plus fantasy points per game. That's absolutely insane. That's more than what Christian McCaffrey had on a points per game basis all season last year, and he scored, a bajillion points. Now, I know that is pretty unsustainable, and we're probably not going to see that again, but Austin Eckler proved himself as a feature back, he proved himself as a lead guy, and he proved to all of us as fantasy managers that we should be drafting him in the first round, and that he has the potential to finish as a top 10 fantasy football running back. Now, we're running out of time here for the first segment, guys. We're going to continue with this draft, so stick around. We're finishing here at pick 7. We'll pick right back up after the break with pick 8. So just to run through what we've had so far: 1, Christian McCaffrey; 2, Saquon Barkley; 3, Ezekiel Elliott; 4, Dalvin Cook; 5, Michael Thomas; 6, Alvin Kamara; and pick number 7, Austin Eckler, the little guy in Los Angeles. So with that, guys, we'll take a short break, and when we get back, we'll continue this draft, continue making the picks, continue with my reasons why, and I hope you enjoy. Stay tuned. We'll be right back right after the break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We're going to get right back into it, guys. We just finished up the first 7 picks of the first round of my fantasy football mock draft, and we're just going to continue. Just to remind everyone, pick number 7, I had Austin Eckler. So at pick number 8, guys, for team number 8, I got Derrick Henry. Now, this is I think he's a pretty polarizing figure right here in the fantasy sports world, because he doesn't catch any passes, or he barely ever does. Now, in other mock drafts, you may see him higher, or you may see him lower for the reception reason. But the fact of the matter is, guys, Derrick Henry was the league's leading rusher last year. He had over 1,500 yards. He had 16 touchdowns, which is a ton. And he's only the 3rd running back in NFL history to score over 290 fantasy points while catching 20 or fewer passes. That's absolutely insane, guys, and I think maybe if not at pick 8, maybe he can slip to 9 or 10, but I think he should be a pick in the top 10 just because he's a pure beast. He runs through people. He scores a ton of fantasy points without having to catch the ball. So imagine if they want to incorporate him more in the pass catching options. It's going to be scary for Derrick Henry. So I believe Derrick Henry, still a top 10 guy. He's still in the Titans, and I think that was a perfect fit for him. I think he's going to be a top 10 pick. Now, for pick number 9, guys, I know we've had a ton of running backs, only one wide receiver selected, but at pick number 9, I got my second receiver going off the board. Arizona Cardinals wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. Now, guys, even though he's leaving Deshaun Watson and going to Arizona with Kyler Murray, I really don't believe his fantasy value is going to dip as much. I believe it actually might go up. There was issues in Houston with scheming and play calling. I believe that they didn't really have a great relationship with the coach. I think a change of scenery for DeAndre Hopkins could be something that serves him very well. And with Kyler Murray, I think Kyler Murray at least does a better job of not holding on the ball too long as much as Deshaun Watson. And I think with DeAndre Hopkins being a clear-cut, he's more of a clear-cut number one. I mean, of course, he's just clear-cut number one on either team. But, Will Fuller is a threat. He's a very, very good threat. I think he's a much better threat than Larry Fitzgerald or Christian Kirk. So on the Arizona Cardinals, DeAndre Hopkins is going to get a ton of targets, and he's basically going to get 150-plus targets on the Cardinals. They pass the ball a lot, and he'll be definitely a top 5, I feel, fantasy wide receiver, and I feel he should be the second one off the board. Now, to finish off the round, guys, this might be a surprise to people. I've seen this guy in several different places in certain mock drafts. I got Tyreek Hill of the Kansas City Chiefs, round 1, pick 10. Another wide receiver off the board at pick 10. Guys, Tyreek Hill's finished as the top fantasy football scorer in certain years, wide receiver a few years ago, and he has the potential to do that again. Now, of course, he's coming off a down season, but we have to remember he missed several games, and for a couple games, Patrick Mahomes wasn't his quarterback as well. So he's going to return to I think he's going to be a top 10 fantasy football wide receiver easily, and I feel that he should be drafted in the first round, maybe early second round, because he just has so much explosive potential, and he could see a return to how he was in 2017, 2018 when he was putting up a ton of fantasy points. And Patrick Mahomes is only going to get better, guys. Tyreek Hill is only getting better, and I see a lot of fantasy points in their future together. So that ends round 1. Just to recap, Christian McCaffrey at 1, Saquon Barkley at 2, Ezekiel Elliott at 3, Dalvin Cook at 4, Michael Thomas at 5, Alvin Kamara at 6, Austin Eckler at 7, Derrick Henry at 8, DeAndre Hopkins at 9, and Tyreek Hill to finish off the round. Now, to start round 2, that same team that just got Tyreek Hill, I feel at pick 11, Nick Chubb, running back, Cleveland Browns. Now, why? Honestly, the only reason I don't have Nick Chubb in the first round is probably because he has Kareem Hunt as a threat, and they use Kareem Hunt a ton in the pass game. We saw towards the end of the season last year there were some people starting Kareem Hunt in their leagues, at least in leagues that I was in, and he was putting up pretty good numbers. To be a guy who was suspended, he didn't play a ton of football all year. He comes back, with no contact all year. He comes back and he looks like he's been out there the whole time. So Kareem Hunt, even taking some touchdowns from Nick Chubb hurts his fantasy stock, and so that's why I have him here. However, I still think he has the potential to be, an RB1, and he's an absolute beast. He finished second in the league in rush yards, so he's a beast. Nick Chubb, round 2, pick 1. Now at pick number 12, right here I got Julio Jones, and I know some people may think he slipped a while. However, we have to remember running backs run these leagues, and I know in PPR, wide receivers are very important as well, but running backs are very, very important, especially the pass catching ones, and I don't think I let him slip too far. So Jones finished second in the receiving yards amongst the wide receivers last year, and again, as he always is, he was a top fantasy football wide receiver. So we have to remember too, Austin Hooper was a great fantasy tight end, and now he's gone. So that's even more targets for Jones, more catches, and I still think he'll be a top 5 fantasy football wide receiver. At pick 13, guys, another receiver with some potential here, Davante Adams of the Green Bay Packers. Now, of course, Davante Adams had a down year last year, but he missed a few games with his toe injury, and he didn't score as many points. He only had 17 points per game. However, I think next season, I think he's still a great elite route runner. He's a great wide receiver, and he has Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback, guys. He's gonna score a ton of points, and I think he'll finish again as a top fantasy football wide receiver. Now, for pick 14, the 4th pick in this round, Chris Godwin. Yes, another wide receiver. Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Not much to say about this guy. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. He had a breakout season in 2019. He basically scored 20 points per game, and I think with Tom Brady as his quarterback now and not a guy throwing a ton of picks, he's still going to do just as well. I have Chris Godwin over Mike Evans here because I think Chris Godwin, I think a lot of people will, and I think Chris Godwin is the better wide receiver at this point. But we'll see. I think Chris Godwin might have a better relationship with Tom Brady in terms of, that rapport on the field. But, of course, we'll have to see. A lot of Mike Evans' points, who I have at pick number 15, the next pick in the draft, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Jameis Winston was throwing so many picks. They constantly had to come back, and he could just bomb the ball over the field. So, I have Chris Godwin at pick 14, Mike Evans at pick 15, two solid picks at wide receiver. Of course, it is sort of iffy with Tom Brady. We have to see who he develops a better relationship with, because I don't think they're going to be throwing as much because they'll be ahead in a lot of games, I feel. At 16, guys, I have Aaron Jones, Green Bay Packers. Jones was great. He ranked 11th in rushing yards, which is, not that amazing. However, he had 16 rushing touchdowns. So that's great fantasy value, guys. Touchdowns, that's money in the bank. We'll take that. And I think he's going to repeat. I think he'll get better. I think he'll be motivated to, crack the top 10 in rushing yards and still be a touchdown beast because he's the RB1 in Green Bay, and that definitely means something. Now, pick number 17 of this draft, I have Leonard Fournette of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, even though he only rushed for 3 touchdowns last season, he had a career high 76 catches. So that's 76 fantasy points just off of receptions. And, if we look at this deeper, that 76 catch total was 2 more than he had in his first 2 years combined. So they're featuring him much more in the pass game. We know we love pass catching running backs. Pass catching running backs equals fantasy football wins. Now at the next pick, 18th pick in the draft, the 8th pick of this round, I got the first team selecting a tight end, and that tight end, Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, this is not just because I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan. This is because of the fact that Travis Kelce is the top tight end in fantasy football. In each of the last 4 seasons, he leads the position in targets, catches, receiving yards, touchdowns, and fantasy points. That's pretty hard to argue with. Of course, George Kittle is a very, very close second, guys, and he's definitely elite. And of course, some guys might take Kittle over Kelce here, but here I got Kelce going as the first tight end off the board at pick 18, Travis Kelce. Now, at pick number 19, guys, I have the running back for the Arizona Cardinals, Kenyon Drake. Now, Kenyon Drake finished 17th, but that's because he wasn't on the Cardinals the entire season, and he got traded at the deadline. So to think about that, he was on the Dolphins for the first, 8 or 7 games. He goes to the Cardinals, and he still finishes as the 17th running back. I think that's pretty darn good. He had 15.3 points per game, and I think that's going to definitely rise because when he was in Arizona, he had 19 touches a game, and he had almost 19 fantasy points in his 6 games with the Arizona Cardinals. Guys, he's going to be a top fantasy football running back, and with David Johnson gone, he's going to get a ton of catches, a ton of goal line touches. I think Kenyon Drake is going to surprise a lot of people and be a great, great running back in fantasy football next year. Now, to finish off the second round before we go on a break here, I want to do this last pick. So, at round 2, pick 10, the 20th overall selection in my fantasy football mock draft, I have Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals, running back. Now, I know Joe Mixon, towards the end of last year, he started to show out a bit. However, the super slow start to the season concerned me. He only averaged 14 points per game, and he's on the Cincinnati Bengals. So, all those things considered, even though I know he's a young guy, he's a talented running back, and I think he has a lot of potential, being on the Bengals doesn't really help him. They're a sputtering team. Their offense usually is not that great. I think he does have upside. I think he has potential to outperform this draft position here. However, I have him here based on, that belief that he can do it. But, last season wasn't the most convincing that he's going to be a top guy. And with that, guys, we're going to go into break. And right after, we'll go right into the third round, go through our picks, and, just continue things as normal. So after the break, guys, round 3 of this fantasy football mock draft. Stay tuned.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Alrighty, people, welcome back to the Fantasy Football Mock Draft. This is the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, right before the break, we had just got done finishing up the round 2. So now I want to move on to round 3, guys. So to start this round off, and I just want to remind everyone, this is not necessarily, I'm not trying to be like all the other mock drafts that you see and say, this player has a higher value than the other, therefore this person should be drafted here, right? Because, how often do fantasy drafts tend to work out that way? It's like, just because, let's say, you should be taking Saquon Barkley second, the human error in things always changes that up. So I want to make it as realistic as possible, in my opinion at least, and not just have guys above another because of their projected value, but rather how I would see a fantasy draft working out when guys see certain guys falling off the board. So with that, I want to keep this going and start off round 3. So to start off round 3, team 1 at this point would have Christian McCaffrey, Joe Mixon, and I think that at this pick here, we might see, or you might see, Lamar Jackson finally off the board at round 3, pick 1. Now, of course, that goes against, what I've said in previous shows, saying, you guys should be waiting on quarterbacks. You can get solid quarterbacks, in the 5th round, a 4th round, and a lot of times the quarterbacks that you draft really early finish, just as good as some other guys that you could have waited on. However, Lamar Jackson is an extremely rare case. Now, while I wouldn't take a quarterback, super soon, like I said, you can bet that Lamar Jackson is probably going to go within the first 3 rounds. In plenty of drafts, guys, he's going to go in the first round. I know that. I didn't include him here because, I really don't believe he should be going in the first round, but, you guys know who you play with. You know how the average fantasy footballer will draft. Someone's going to draft him in the first round because they're going to see his name up there and how many points he scored last season, and they're going to say, you know what, I want him. So if we look at his numbers a bit deeper here, we can actually see that Lamar Jackson averaged 27.7 points per game. That's pretty absurd. And that's actually one of the 2 best fantasy seasons ever at the quarterback position. Now, I actually saw a stat, I'm trying to remember where it was. It might have been on ESPN, that said if you adjusted Lamar Jackson's ridiculous touchdown percentage of 9% and you moved it down to the league average, which was around 5%, he still would have been the league leading quarterback in fantasy football by 19 points. That's absolutely ridiculous, and that kind of value you don't really find in a fantasy football quarterback. He's an absolute beast, and he's basically like, I'm not trying to say that, Lamar Jackson is a running back. I know there was that whole thing, not bad for a running back, etc., etc. However, he's basically a running back that plays quarterback at a high level. That's amazing. That's probably the most perfect thing that you could ask for in fantasy football. Of course, he's not catching passes, but when he runs the ball, he's picking up huge amounts of yards. He's picking up a ton of touchdowns, and he is an absolute stud for fantasy football. So to start off round 3, Team 1 will have Christian McCaffrey, Joe Mixon, and Lamar Jackson in their squad. I can tell you right now that if someone had Lamar Jackson and Christian McCaffrey last season, they probably won their Super Bowl. Now, pick number 2 of the third round, Team number 2 will be selecting Kenny Golladay of the Detroit Lions. Now, Kenny Golladay doesn't get, that much love, just I think because he plays for the Lions and they haven't been good in quite some time. However, he's a very, very good wide receiver, and last year he led wide receivers in touchdown catches. And does anyone know who his quarterback was? Jeff Driscoll, David Blau. You guys recognize those names because they're not very well known. Those were his quarterbacks after Matthew Stafford missed, I think, most of the season last year. So, guys, with Matthew Stafford back in the rotation, you can bet that Kenny Golladay is going to be a solid fantasy football wide receiver. He's a beast. He's basically, they're calling him Babytron out there in Detroit. He's the new Megatron. He's not Megatron, but he's a solid wide receiver, so look out for him. With the third pick in this round, I have another wide receiver coming off the board. His name? Amari Cooper of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, we know that Cooper, he signed a 5-year, $100 million extension, and he actually had a really good fantasy showing. Of course, he had nagging injuries that hampered his play, and he wasn't the same on the road that he was at home. We dove into that in detail in a previous episode about how, Amari Cooper at home he's actually 2 different wide receivers. There's a home game Amari Cooper, with the Dallas fans screaming and cheering his name, and then there's Amari Cooper on the road who basically taps out, doesn't want to play. So you do have to deal with that. However, last year, his 246.5 fantasy points is great. That was in half PPR. Of course, we're basing this off of PPR. He's going to be a solid addition. I believe that he'll finish as a top 10 guy, so long as Dak Prescott is a quarterback. Kellen Moore is still calling the plays. They're going to pass the ball a lot. However, as of right now, it's not looking too optimistic for the Dallas Cowboys. They might be facing a holdout. However, regardless, we move on to the next pick. The 4th pick in the third round is right here. I have DJ Moore. Now, some people may have him higher, some people may have him lower, but I think DJ Moore is a very, very interesting candidate. I think he had an interesting pick, He had a breakout season last year, guys, and I think the only reason he wasn't, he could have been much better with more touchdowns. I think, the lack of touchdowns was the problem for him. However, I feel that with Teddy Bridgewater now, and, finally they have a stable quarterback, and it's not Kyle Allen, DJ Moore is going to flourish even more. I think after he has a breakout season with, a pretty crappy quarterback, I think with Teddy Bridgewater, a guy who takes care of the ball, even though he's just a game manager, he's going to get a ton of targets, he's going to get a ton of points, and I think he's going to be even better than he was last year. So right here, I got DJ Moore. Now, in the 5th pick of this round, I have the Las Vegas Raiders running back, Josh Jacobs. Now, he finished outside the top 20 when he was a rookie, but on his points per game average, he was in the top 20. Actually, he was 16th overall. So, if he didn't miss any time, actually, according to NFL.com, he was projected to finish 12th. So that's pretty darn good as a rookie, and you can only expect him to get better. I hope for his sake and for fantasy football manager's sake that the Raiders decide to involve him more in the pass game. We really didn't see him involved in the pass game too much. However, Josh Jacobs was a stud as a rookie, and a lot, if he didn't miss time, it's my belief that he had a very good chance at winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. So keep your eyes on Josh Jacobs. I have him here as a top 25 pick. He might finish, top 15, top 10, I wouldn't say top 10 at this point, but he has a lot of upside, guys. So keep your eyes on Josh Jacobs of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now here in the 6th pick of this round, Miles Sanders, running back for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this will be our last selection before going on break because we're slowly running out of time. But I want to talk about Miles Sanders for a bit here. You know, the Eagles' 9-7 record was nothing, crazy, and their offense seemed to be sputtering at times. However, at this point, Miles Sanders is the clear-cut number 1 running back in Philly. Now, it's been a while since there was a clear-cut number 1 who wasn't sharing touches with another running back in Philadelphia. And, you could still get some pretty solid production out of those guys. I mean, remember, in their Super Bowl run, LeGarrette Blount, he had a ton of touchdowns. LeGarrette Blount and Jay Ajayi were a nice 1-2 punch. And even though they weren't consistent, giving you huge fantasy points all the time, they were solid running backs. I think if all those touches are going to one running back in Philly, he has a ton of upside to outperform this draft position. I think he's definitely one of my sleeper guys who I think could have a huge breakout season this year in Philly with Carson Wentz as his quarterback, and he can catch a ton of passes too. So he's definitely a big threat. Remember, guys, Jordan Howard's gone. He's with the Dolphins. This is Miles Sanders' team now. Well, not his team, but this is his backfield now. And I do want to add, even though, in the beginning he wasn't scoring a ton of points, that was because he was sharing touches. And towards the end of the season, he was averaging almost 20 fantasy points per game over that stretch where Jordan Howard wasn't playing. So that's pretty darn good, guys, and that'll definitely fetch him a top finish as a fantasy football running back. Definitely keep your eyes on Miles Sanders, because I think he's one of those guys who could really break out next season as a number 1 back now with the Philadelphia Eagles. So just to recap what we've selected so far before we go into the break and finish off the round: Lamar Jackson, Kenny Golladay, Amari Cooper, DJ Moore, Josh Jacobs, and Miles Sanders of the Philadelphia Eagles. So with that, guys, we'll take a quick break and we'll finish off the 3rd round here. I think this will be the last round of our mock draft, but we'll finish off that 3rd round and we'll continue our show. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Back finishing up our fantasy football mock draft, guys. We're in round 3. We are at pick 7 of the round, and just to recap, we finished that off with Miles Sanders at pick 6. We're moving on here. I believe this pick here will be a tight end, and why I believe that is because when you're doing a fantasy football draft, it usually turns out as soon as a certain position like quarterback or tight end, and even later on in the rounds when a defense goes, people tend to be very reactionary and they go, oh man, yeah, I forgot I haven't drafted that, or oh no, there's not many of those left, and they'll start selecting that even if they have a need somewhere else. So if you remember, towards the end of the 2nd round, Travis Kelce was selected, and that was by team number 3 because we're doing a snake draft. So now we're back here at team number 7, and they might see, oh, Travis Kelce's off the board. There's not many elite tight ends. Why don't I grab George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers? Guys, behind Travis Kelce, George Kittle is clearly an elite and possible number 1 tight end, and he definitely has potential to finish his fantasy football's number 1 tight end. Of course, he doesn't have Patrick Mahomes, so it's not, he's not in as much of a pass prolific offense as Travis Kelce. However, he finished as tight end 2 last year, I believe. Him or Mark Andrews, he's amazing. He's just all around a stud. So George Kittle here, and that definitely would be a solid pick, because if he's getting you, 16 points per game at tight end, that is well worth it. If we look at guys like Odell last year with 12.6 points per game. Chris Carson was the running back in Seattle. He had 15.5 points per game. Le'Veon Bell had less points per game than George Kittle did last year, guys. So, sometimes having an elite tight end can really be a difference maker, and having that position sealed up and not only getting, 7-8 points per game can really, really change the shape and scope of your team. So now we move on. The next pick in the 3rd round, the 8th pick of the 3rd round, we have Todd Gurley of the Atlanta Falcons. So, of course, this pick is going to be interesting in a lot of drafts. Last year, some people were drafting Todd Gurley in round 1. Some people drafted him in round 2. And, of course, in other leagues, a lot of people waited on him. Todd Gurley is such a polarizing figure because he was clearly one of the, if not the best, running back in the National Football League just a few years ago. However, the arthritic knees came up as a big deal, and we saw last year with the Rams he wasn't as productive. Of course, they were limiting his touches, and that's just scary. That's just the plain facts of it all. If you can't rely on him to be out there every game, as a coach, it's hard as a fantasy manager. You don't have as many games with Todd Gurley to be resting him or keeping him on your bench to save him. To rely on that. So, of course, Todd Gurley has elite potential. We know that. But this is going to be a big risk-reward kind of guy. You're going to be taking a shot on him, drafting him, and hoping that he can stay healthy. Because I believe if he can stay healthy, he'll have a big fantasy football season, to be honest with you guys. I have him here in the 3rd round. He can easily outperform this because he'll be the top guy in Atlanta catching passes. He's going back to where he played college football. There's sort of a homecoming for him. And I believe that he has a chance to do something special in the Atlanta Falcons uniform. Of course, that all, hangs upon the fact that he has to stay healthy, and his knees have to help him out there. So that would be the number 8 pick of the 3rd round in this draft. Now, we move on with the 9th pick in the 3rd round of the 2020 GSMC Fantasy Football Mock Draft, guys. David Johnson. Now, I know, this is probably a groaner because a lot of people are giving up on David Johnson. I know, understandably so. His production really dipped. He had to deal with nagging injuries. That's fine, justified. However, honestly, going to Houston is good for David Johnson. Even though, he's fallen off in value and all the injury stuff, of course. In his first 6 games of 2019, he averaged over 20 fantasy points. So he's not absolutely horrible, and I think he has some sort of potential with Deshaun Watson and being the pass-catching lead guy in Houston. Guys, sometimes we just have to hang our hats on the fact that just being a number 1 at a certain position for a certain team is going to get you fantasy points. Guys, think about it like this. No GM is going out here and would say, I want Tyler Boyd over, Devontae Adams or something like that. However, of course, there are games when you get someone like Tyler Boyd on the Bengals who's outperforming Devontae Adams. So the thing is, we just take chances on guys because they are number 1s on their team. They're getting targets, they're getting catches. It's not necessarily about, certain skill or if a guy's better than another. So you always have to keep that in mind, guys. Of course, you may look at someone and say, you look at someone like Allen Robinson, who's on the Chicago Bears, and you look, yes, he's a great receiver and all, but you have to remember that his quarterback is not the best. So there's a lot of things to consider when drafting, when thinking about who you're going to draft, why you're going to draft them. Always remember that, guys. I think David Johnson, just to get back to the point here, David Johnson has a shot to be a solid running back. He'll be an RB2. I don't believe he'll be an RB1, but if he's getting a ton of pass catches, he's going to be definitely better than what people are expecting. Now, to finish off our final round here, guys, I'm going to finish with a wide receiver. He plays for the Los Angeles Rams, Cooper Kupp. Guys, Cooper Kupp, last season, I thought he was going to finish as fantasy's number one receiver. He was absolutely amazing for that first half of the season. He was averaging over 20 points per game. And, even though he slowed down a lot, I think next year he'll bounce back, and I think he'll finish as a solid top 15 definitely, and possible top 10 fantasy football wide receiver of the Los Angeles Rams. There's been, Brandon Cooks has been, I'm pretty sure there was a tweet he put out recently, and he said, "Free me." Los Angeles Rams are really offloading a lot of their players. I think Cooper Kupp is going to be the top guy on this team, ahead of Robert Woods, ahead of Brandon Cooks. He's a solid wide receiver, has a lot of potential, and I think he'd be a good pick here. End of the third round, I think is actually a steal for Cooper Kupp. I'd be surprised if he lasted this long in certain leagues. However, I'm not. Remember, it's not just about their value and if they're better than a certain person or not. It's about how I feel, realistically a draft would go. So, guys, that'll end our fantasy football draft for now. In the future, we'll do different iterations. I'll go more rounds, of course. But I know, as the rounds get later and later, the picks sort of, you can, switch them out. This guy could go for this guy. It doesn't really matter. It's about what your team needs are at that point in time. Some highlights, though, of this draft, Christian McCaffrey, I do believe, goes first overall. I don't believe that someone, unless they're a Giants fan, is taking Saquon over him. I don't believe that you necessarily should at that point, but I think Christian McCaffrey is worth that overall pick, first overall. Tyreek Hill goes in the top 10. Lamar Jackson goes first pick of the third round. And Austin Eckler goes from Chargers backup to a top 10 fantasy football pick. So, guys, with that, we're going to go into our break. And when we get back, we're going to talk the NFC East. And we're going to talk a bit of Cowboys, Eagles, and how I see that shaping out. So stay tuned, guys, and we'll be right back.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Guys, and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We just got done our, one-man, 3-round fantasy football mock draft. Of course, that'll be updated, guys, as things happen. Of course, it'll be updated, after the rookies come in and all that good stuff. And of course, I definitely do want to add, have just a defensive round and see how, do a later round of when I see defenses going and who I think will go first, the last, etc., etc. However, now we move on. Right now, I want to talk about a division in football that has rightfully earned the name the NFC East. The NFC East is it's definitely one of the weakest divisions in football. It's very recently it's been very hard to just say there's a clear-cut number one division winner year to year. And actually, I think off the top of my head, for the past 6 years, the Cowboys and Eagles have shared winning that division half and half. They've each won it 3 times in the past 6 years. They constantly are tossing it up. And last year, it went down to the last game between them, and the division winner was 9-7. So they constantly are a mess, it feels. And I think recently the problem for the Cowboys has been underperforming and just doing cowboyish things, as, one Shannon Sharp would say. And I think for the Eagles, they're dealing with a ton of injuries all the time. This past year, their secondary was decimated, their wide receiving core was decimated, and if you guys remember, even when they went and won the Super Bowl, they had a ton of injuries on their team. I don't know if they're cursed, if someone put, a hex on them or something, but they're always dealing with injuries. The Redskins and the Giants have been bad for a very, very long time. So, and that has led to that struggle between the Cowboys and the Eagles, with neither one of them. Actually, I'd give the edge to the Eagles because they won a Super Bowl very recently. However, even after winning the Super Bowl, we saw them struggle a bit, and we constantly see them struggle. So, I want to go through, how I feel that this division is going to shape up next season, just because I think it's always interesting to predict the NFC East, because honestly, I'm not sure anyone ever really knows what's going to happen on a year-to-year basis. Now, I will say this first, guys. I think next year, the Redskins are finishing dead last in the division. I really don't see them making any sort of big jump in skill. I don't see, their quarterback situation is very, very iffy. Dwayne Haskins really did not look ready for the NFL last season. Of course, he has potential, but just not very good overall. They traded for Kyle Allen, and well, he's not Cam Newton, definitely. And I think I would rather have Case Keenum over Kyle Allen. We saw Kyle Allen on the Carolina Panthers. He had some bright spots, but overall, he just is not very good. The Redskins, I see dead last. Plain and simple. Now, next, for this third spot, in terms of, recent performance and the rosters of the team, it feels almost like I have to put the Giants here because, the top two are almost always the Eagles and the Cowboys. However, I think people shouldn't sleep on the Giants as much as they usually do. The Giants, Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram, Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones, that's not that bad of a squad. Also, Darius Slayton came up and, he made some great plays and he's starting to come into his own. Golden Tate's still on that team. So, they're not that bad. I understand, they're the Giants. Their defense is definitely a big issue and their offensive line has struggled. However, I think with, Saquon being back into full health, Daniel Jones growing, coming more into his own, maybe he can work on turning that ball over. I think they can do much better than people are going to give them credit for. However, that is a reach. And where they comfortably sit is third in the division. I think that's very realistic for them. Now, this top two here. It feels like you could pick either, and you could make sufficient arguments for both. But here's why I'm going to give the edge to the Philadelphia Eagles. It's not because I live here. It's not because I live in Philadelphia, for those of you who didn't know. It's not because I'm also, a Cowboy hater. It is simply because it feels like the Cowboys right now don't have it all completely together. Now, of course, they made some good signings. I like the HaHa Clinton-Dix signing because they're addressing the safety position, which they've needed to address for a long time. However, when we look deeper into these sorts of things, HaHa Clinton-Dix has been on 4 different teams in the past 3 years. Guys, there has to be a reason for that. Teams aren't going to let, an elite guy just walk 4 teams to let a guy go that many times. Of course, he's not a bum. HaHa Clinton-Dix has definitely had good seasons, and I think he had a good run with the Green Bay Packers. But, of course, guys, when you see a guy getting released that many times, there has to be something going on that we maybe aren't aware of. However, I will mention that I do like the fact that he's reunited with Mike McCarthy, his old head coach. There's some familiarity there, and I think, maybe he could definitely play up to his potential in Dallas. However, guys, my one thing with Dallas is that I feel like they're not really addressing the big holes on their team in free agency that they could have. Signing Gerald McCoy, Gerald McCoy is a good player, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, I don't think they necessarily needed him. They lost Robert Quinn. He was their, basically, DeMarcus Lawrence severely underperformed last year, making Robert Quinn probably their best pass rusher. They lost him. He's gone. What did they do to remediate that? Nothing. They lost Byron Jones. Okay, a lot of people argue against Byron Jones because he doesn't create a ton of turnovers. However, there is a reason that the Dolphins are paying him. You know what I mean? The guy's like, a lot of people do see him as a lockdown corner. He just can't create turnovers. I understand that he's, that's not his strength at all. I think he has 2 picks in the last however many seasons. He's not creating turnovers, but he was considered a lockdown for some time. What cornerback are they going to have now? I believe they have Jordan Lewis, Chidobe Awuzie, and, these aren't guys that are considered, number one corners. So it's going to be tough. They lost Jeff Heath. I know he wasn't some sort of, crazy stud, but he was a role player on that team. And I feel like the Dallas Cowboys aren't filling holes that they necessarily need to. They're just getting the names, sort of like the Rams do. They just like to get big names for some odd reason. Now, on the other side of this, the Philadelphia Eagles. At this point in time, I feel like the Eagles, they're assessing their holes, and they're not just going out and signing names because they're there and available to them to try and, just add names and more depth. I feel like, the addition of Nickel Roby-Coleman and the big trade for Darius Slay and paying him, those were really smart moves by the Philadelphia Eagles to make sure they filled holes that they've had for quite some time. I mean, let's think about this, guys. They won their division. No matter what the record was, they won their division. They got to the playoffs with no receivers, no corners. Ronald Darby left, but I feel like Nickel Roby-Coleman is a great and maybe possibly even better replacement for him because he'll be in 16 games. He won't get injured as much as Ronald Darby. Also, Darius Slay doesn't get enough credit, but he's an elite corner, and of course he was on the Lions, who have been a bad team for a long, long time, but Darius Slay has a lot of great potential, and I just feel like, the Eagles are going to address their needs in a much better manner than the Dallas Cowboys are going to, and therefore they're going to be a better overall team. No matter what, you can look at the Cowboys roster and say, look at this talent here, look at this talent there, but they, for some reason, can't get it together. They haven't in quite some time, and I feel like the Philadelphia Eagles, even just with more grit, that underdog mentality, and I think just better management, because I think Howie Roseman has done a fantastic job with that team in recent years. I think they'll end up as the better team, and they'll edge out the Dallas Cowboys to win the division and to stamp their spot in the playoffs, not clinging on to being the second wild card team or the first wild card team in the NFC. Now, of course, I do think it'll be close. They might go 1-1 in their division games. I don't think, the Dallas Cowboys are going to, have a negative record and it's just going to be easy for the Philadelphia Eagles. However, I'm going to give them the edge for that reason, and also because I believe in their quarterback a bit more. I believe Carson Wentz is a better quarterback than Dak Prescott. I know this is a huge debate, and I know Dak Prescott has had better numbers. His rookie year was absolutely amazing, and he's won the division, and he's went in the playoffs. However, I don't remember anyone ever saying Dak Prescott was playing at an MVP level week 13 of the regular season. I know Carson Wentz, what he can do. He took a team to the playoffs with no receivers, and, they're only going to get better. They have to draft wide receivers, of course, but I feel like the Philadelphia Eagles will win the NFC East. Now, with that, guys, we're going to go into our final break of the show, and to wrap up the show, of course, my 3 wishes. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
right, guys, welcome to the final segment of today's show. We're keeping it the same today. We're going to go over some of my wishes. If you've been listening, almost I think all of my episodes have ended with 3 or so of wishes that I have for the NFL, the offseason, the world in general. But today, we're going to start off talking about the NFL. My first wish, guys, is for the new postseason teams that are going to be added to the 14 teams that are in the postseason to make the most of the new slots in each conference. Now, to make that a bit more clear, what I'm trying to say is I'm hoping that this all turns out well. A lot of players really did not want the playoff pool to be expanded to 14 teams because there are numerous health concerns and safety issues with adding an entire, a whole nother game to the playoffs and not giving the 2 seed a bye. It really changes the scope of the playoffs, honestly, and the seeding. Getting the number 1 seed is even more important than it ever has been. Last year, actually, for the past 2 years, the number 2 seed has won the Super Bowl. So, getting the first seed wasn't all that important because you're still getting, a bye in the playoffs if you have that second seed. And, you can obviously still make a run at the trophy. Now, though, the second seed has to play the 7th seed in the wild card round. And so, adding that game, it changes a lot of things because if you don't have, a lot of teams may have the first or second seed locked up by the time that the end of the regular season comes around, but now, and they rest their players. But now, if you don't have the first seed wrapped up, you might not be able to rest your guys at all if you don't have the second seed wrapped up as well. Now, it used to be that, you could have this, you could just be satisfied with the second seed in your conference and just take your bye, if you knew you weren't going to get that first seed or you just wanted to rest. But now it is literally do or die for that first seed. And so it's kind of tough. It's going to make it tougher on the players. And I just hope that this all turns out well. I don't want to see, bum squads that are 8-8 come into the playoffs and just waste the spot, but force, players to have another game of hitting, tackling, possibly getting injured. I know that everyone has mentioned that, if that happened last season, the Steelers and the Rams would have been in the playoffs. Do I think they would have done much? Not really. So I'm just hoping that the teams that do take advantage of this opportunity are teams that are quality, that may have, come up short in the beginning of the year, but are catching their rhythm towards the end. I really don't believe the Steelers would have done much without Ben Roethlisberger, so therefore I feel like that would have been a waste for them. And the Rams were sputtering all season. They didn't really find themselves before it was too late. So I'm hoping that next season we can see more complete teams occupying these spots, and that this doesn't become just another game for people to watch, because these games and the rests do mean a lot to teams and players, and if they don't have that rest, it could really affect how they play the next game, and it could really change, who gets that Super Bowl, who has an opportunity at the Super Bowl just because, they're more rested and more healthy. The 1 seed has never been more powerful than it is. This is definitely going to be very, very interesting. So my first wish is that I wish that this will all turn out for the best. I mean, of course, that's a corny wish. Of course, everyone always hopes for things to go well. But I just wanted to give my analysis on that. It's definitely, though, I will add, it's exciting. It's exciting to see that other teams will get a shot, and we'll get to see a whole new dynamic, a whole new opportunity for upsets, and there could be an 8-8 team winning the Super Bowl and all that. That there is some sort of spectacle in that, which is cool. But at the end of the day, player safety and player health is of the utmost importance, because if our favorite and star players, elite players, if they're not out there playing, it's really hard to watch. And if they get hurt, it's just upsetting, sad, and unfortunate. So that's my first wish. I may only have time for 2 wishes today. Let's see. My second wish for today is for the New England Patriots to tank. Yes, and that's not only because, I'm a hater and I'm on the they're cheaters bandwagon. That's just because I want to see Bill Belichick tank, Get a young quarterback in next year's draft. You know, people are talking about tanking for Trevor. Get a young quarterback, build him up, and let's see the true, you know, prowess and genius of Bill Belichick. I think, you know, the quarterback market right now is just scarce. The only real, you know, Andy Dalton might be on the market. Cam Newton is the only guy that I see with, you know, any elite potential on the market right now. And that might not even be worth it. I think, you know, if Bill Belichick doesn't retire soon, he can tank, get a great quarterback in the draft, build him up, and possibly go on championship runs. Now, of course, that's a multiple-year investment. Tom Brady might be out of the league by then, but who says it has to be a competition while they're both in the league? Should one leave before the other and the other goes and wins it, I think people are still going to view it like that. You know, oh, look, you know, Bill Belichick or Tom Brady, they're out of the game, and the other one went and won without him. I think it's still pretty similar. So I think that could be a really interesting prospect. So I would love to see that happen. Now, don't get me wrong. I am loving the fact that Tom Brady's not on the Patriots anymore. I cannot wait to see them have a losing record because I hope they do. And, you know, I'm just like you guys. You know, I'm tired of seeing the Patriots. Sorry, Patriots fans. But I'm definitely tired of seeing them win. And I know it's coming from a Chiefs fan who just had his team win the Super Bowl. However, you know, a lot of people, this thing tends to happen. You know, the Warriors were amazing to watch. They were super fun, but everyone couldn't wait until someone dethroned them. Enter Kawhi Leonard. So I'm just hoping, you know, we can see a true final end to the dynasty, because it'd be actually insane if Bill Belichick could still make a deep playoff run next season. I'd love to see them, you know, sort of go into a mini rebuild, get a young, great quarterback, develop him, and show the world what Bill Belichick can do without Tom Brady. With that, guys, I want to thank you for listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I want to ask that you guys leave a comment below, write us a review, let us know, you know, hey, let me know if I suck, because then I can do, you know, something to improve. Let me know what you like, what you didn't like, and definitely, listen to the entire mock draft and see what you think. That's if you skipped ahead or around or anything like that. Otherwise, I hope you follow us I ask that you please follow us on all social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, guys. That helps us out a bunch. Again, as I've been saying every week, please, guys, stay safe, practice social distancing, stay home if you don't necessarily have to leave the house. You know, if it's something just for fun, maybe think twice about it, guys. Stay healthy and protect yourselves from the coronavirus, guys. With that, I want to ask you guys have a great night, and we'll see you here next time. See you later, guys.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.